Hi, this is Jordi from Agents at Work, and today I have the pleasure to be with Tom from LiveKit. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jordi. It's great to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm excited to be on the podcast.
If I'm not wrong, you work for LiveKit.
That's right. I'm a product manager at LiveKit.
Many people will already know about LiveKit, but for those who don't, how would you introduce the company?
LiveKit is an open source platform for building real-time audio and video applications. And these days, what we're seeing people build a lot of is voice agents. So people use LiveKit to build voice agents with our open source voice agent stack. And then also they use LiveKit to transport the audio from the user to the server and then when the AI generates the audio to pass that audio back to the user. And it's a great company to be working at. I feel very lucky to be here, and the voice agent space in general is just really fun place to be working in that's growing a lot.
Yeah, voice is one of the main interfaces that I use when I relate with other general intelligence, also known as people. So mainly it's like a medium that I use with them. And I am really excited because when we talk about AI agents, usually like most of the people are using text ones, like they use ChatGPT, and then that's the main thing that we started with. But it's pretty clear to me that voice is going to play like a major role on filling the AGI. So this idea to be able to talk to the devices, and there are like many challenges there. Like from engineering point of view, like just dealing with audio data, it's complicated in itself, and like there's a lot of Fourier transformations, blah, 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 that they were already hard. Then you put the AI on top, and then you put the AI behavior. So there is like engineering, research, and I'm sure that we will be able to unpack this in this podcast. Plus, a lot of products are starting to use it. I think that LiveKit is mainly famous for being the one ChatGPT chose to add audio for their app. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I'd love to tell you the story about how that came about. So LiveKit, as I mentioned, was originally a open source platform for building audio and video experiences. So you can imagine if like you're trying to build a conference call like what we're both in right now in the Riverside podcast recording app. And as our co-founder and CEO was talking to ChatGPT, where he was like texting it, writing with text to it, and he was like, "Wait a minute, I bet I could talk to this thing. Wouldn't that be cool?" So he built together this, like basically, it wasn't none of the tooling was there because ChatGPT was so new, but like he basically put together a pipeline where it transcribed his voice and then passed the transcription to ChatGPT and then generated from the output of ChatGPT voice back. And he wrote about it in a blog post, and it just so happened that OpenAI was thinking about building a voice interface to ChatGPT. And they found the blog post, and they were looking around. They needed some way to transport audio from the ChatGPT client, the app on the phone, to the server. And they really liked LiveKit's infrastructure for moving the audio around. It's a very robust global network for moving audio around at very low latency. And so what was really neat next, and what happened next, was that OpenAI collaborated with our team to build the voice agent. And there's a lot to building that voice agent, a lot around, just to take one example, like turn taking, how to know when the agent should stop speaking and when the person interrupts it, for example. Or I'll just stick with that example for the moment. So we collaborated with OpenAI on helping them build their voice mode. And then we took that framework and we open sourced it, and that became really what the focus of the company is now. We have this open source framework for anybody to build a voice agent with. And our customers use that open source framework plus our audio and video transport to really build these amazing new applications that goes right back to what you were saying, Jordi, about like the future of human computer interfaces is going to be voice. And we're just going to see more and more of that. It's just a fun thing to be a part of.
Yeah, like it makes me happy because it's literally you can just do things. Like imagine like you have like ChatGPT for first time, you start interacting with it, and you just say like, I wish that I could talk to this, and then you go and build it, and then ChatGPT comes. Like it's such a great story. We're thinking about building this. We would like to do it with your infrastructure. And that's already a crazy good story. But then taking the learnings from there and having an open source project that everyone can use, it's even crazy. So, like I'm really happy of all the serendipity that went through in that story that brought us like the kind of products that we have today. When you say that it's mainly like an open platform, an open source platform, how can people take advantage of it? Like what does it mean? how do people know that they need LiveKit?
People know that they need LiveKit when they are considering building a voice agent. And the types of people are considering building voice agents, there's a lot of startups out there that are like, oh, I know a lot about trucking and logistics. I really think voice agents could be helpful here. Or I used to work at, my family owns restaurants and the phone is ringing all the time and we lose so much revenue by not answering the phone. So that's one set of people that are like, oh, I want to build a voice agent. Now, what do I need to build that voice agent with something. And they start looking around to the different platforms out there for building voice agents. Another category that I want to talk about too is like you also have these big either consumer companies or B2B companies that have a large market channel already and see the opportunity with voice and they don't want to get left behind. And so they're building voice agents as well.
Okay, so there's LiveKit in the center, but how does the whole ecosystem look like? And like who are the other main players, or how do you interact with the ecosystem at large?
So in the voice agent ecosystem, from the perspective of developers, they look at the ecosystem and say, okay, I know I need some way to build the voice agent, something that can orchestrate the conversation. And then they also know that they need large language models or these advanced models to generate the content. And when they're looking around at voice orchestration platforms, I think you can generally break these down into two categories. There's the closed platforms and the open source platforms. So on the closed platforms, these are platforms that generally you can show up and you can build with no code or low code. Some of the closed platforms as well also have APIs that you can build with code with them as well. And then you also have open source platforms where the developer can really see every aspect of how the stack works and make changes at the lowest layers or at the higher levels in the stack. And where LiveKit sits is a open source agent development platform where people can build their agent in Python. And then the way we make money from this is that we provide the audio and the real-time audio transport, and in some cases video transport when we talk about avatars. And then coming soon, we're also going to start allowing people to host their agent with us so that they don't have to go host their agent on EC2 or whatever. They can just host their agent with us. And I think that's a pretty good, there's lots of different ways you can kind of think about the ecosystem, but I think that's a good starting point.
So there are like two main of clients then, or main users, like people who are connecting these agents to like the audio infrastructure that already exists. For example, like when I do a phone call and there is a call center, I guess that there are like people that are using agents on that one. And then there are other people that are building like fully new experiences, like ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, it's an app that has this. Would like this be a good mental framework for this?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. And I actually would add one more category to that. So I think of the three categories for voice agents being first, replacing existing business call volume. So things like somebody calling a restaurant or like the call center example for large enterprises that you brought up a moment ago. Then the other category is these, oftentimes in the voice AI world, we refer to them as narrative type experiences. So things like Character AI. Character AI is another example of a company that's building on LiveKit, or OpenAI's ChatGPT that's building on LiveKit. These sort of entirely novel and creative experiences that I think are just so neat. And then there's a third category, and that's the computer, just general voice interfaces. So for this category, the example I like to give is imagine you're trying to onboard someone, a user onto your platform, and you need to know something about their profile, like what their name is, where they're from, what kind of wine they like to drink. And people fall off the onboarding path. It's a major problem in when you're developing an app in general, is getting people through onboarding and activating them. And if you use a voice interface where people can just talk about themselves, you have such higher rates of success of getting through the onboarding workflow rather than having people tap their way through all the details on their phone on the little keyboard.
Yeah, something that I have noticed a lot is for people who are not only engineers, but at large, like most of the population, they really prefer to have interfaces that remind them of how they interact with humans rather than with machines. And then many engineers say like, well, we don't even need a UI. Like, just having the terminal. What else is needed? I can put my flags there. I'm already instructing what I want. What else is needed? Then people build the desktop UI And then everyone started using it. They were like, wow, this is so much better. And most of the engineers still don't get it. It's like, it's really that much better. It's just the same. The button is just triggering this command. And you're like, okay. And I think that with voice, we're going to go through the same kind of phase. Like most of the people are going to say like, do I really need voice for this? But you just need to check how kids interact with machines. And you could see
Hmm.
this with tactile, like quite a lot. Like you could see like little kids after playing with the iPad touching the TV and say like, what kind of ancient tech is this? And I would assume that interacting with a computer without voice is going to feel like that for like coming generations. And for us was totally like sci-fi. So I am really pumped, to see like the future like developing in real time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think you say it so well. And another way that I've heard that a similar idea said that I really appreciate is rather than when people are interacting with computers, rather than making the person go closer to the machine, and so they have to like, point and click, or they have to use a terminal, you bring the machine closer to the human and make it more easy for the human to access in a human way.
Yeah. The example that I always say is like when I interact with my accountant, I usually do it through voice
Hmm.
and they don't provide an MCP or anything like that. Like I just tell to them what needs to be done. At most, they tell me like send me some PDFs. I send the PDFs on email and I forget about it. I don't care if they put it in their QuickBooks or they have their own system or they like print it and put it in a folder until next year. I don't know what is going on there. I just know that my taxes are like well done,
Hmm.
so I can sleep at night. And with machines, I want the same. I want to be able to express what I want. I want to have a feedback loop as a normal conversation and then move on. So some people are using this not only for introducing input in the machine, but actually for narrative stories. Like I know people who are using ChatGPT to tell stories. And something that they make a big fuss of it, it's the idea of they can do more than just talking. So they can put like, it was a really like dark night and then like an owl.
Hmm.
And kids love that. And we are like narrative beings. So, like we really get
Hmm.
hooked to stories. How challenging is that? Because you said at the beginning, like the first version of LiveKit was I take voice and I translate it to text. Are we still in that phase where everything is like I take voice, put text, send it to the text engine known as LLM, got back text, transform to sound, and then give it back? Or there are like multimodal systems that are already taking advantage of we are trained on audio, so we can do all these things?
So that's a great question. My answer to that depends on what type of category people are building in. In the like in the use case where most people are getting revenue traction and like building businesses that are growing their revenue, they're targeting replacing existing call workflows. And that doesn't necessarily mean phone call workflows, but replacing some business workflow with a voice agent. And in those cases, people are still using what we refer to as the cascade in voice agents, the cascade pipeline architecture, which is to use a speech to text service, then an LLM and a text to speech service, and cascade the data through that pipeline. In the narrative use case that you were just talking about, we're seeing people use these speech in, or excuse me, audio in, audio out models and succeed with them. And the difference is that in the narrative use cases, you don't need to, as reliable, interact with external systems. So when you, like, for example, call your accountant, he or she needs to interact with an external system and input your data somewhere, or look up your data about something, or eventually like submit your tax return to the government. Whereas in the narrative experiences, you don't need to interact with an external service, and the audio in, audio out models are generally considered less reliable at tool calling and interacting with external services compared to building with the cascade and being able to really kind of wrap your hands around as much as you can with an LLM, wrap your hands around what the LLM is doing and try to like wrangle it into making the tool call in exactly the way you want.
So now that we know the use cases, if I am an engineer and I want to build in this direction, what are the main challenges that I have to face when dealing with audio?
The first thing that people encounter when they're considering building a voice agent is just figuring out like which model should I use. For every there's like at the top of the decision tree, it's like, do I use what's called like a real time, a speech in, speech out model, like, or do I use the cascading system? And then once you've made a decision on that, and just to reiterate based on what I said previously, if you're using something that's going to rely on tool calls or you need it to really follow instructions strictly, you should be using the cascading system. Given the current state of speech in, speech out models, you should be using text to speech, LLM, text, speech to text, LLM, text to speech. But then once you've made that decision, then there's different models that you could choose in each one of these categories. Which speech to text do I choose? Which LLM do I choose? What generally people do is they kind of look around and see what other people are doing, what's maybe the default settings and whatever voice platform that they're building on. And they start with that, and then they quickly encounter what I consider to be the biggest problem in voice agent building today, which is turn detection. It's really hard to get the agent to not interrupt the user or to recognize when the user is interrupting the agent. And not only is it hard, but it's also crucial. If the voice agent interrupts the user enough times in a call, the user is going to hang up. They get frustrated and they hang up, and the call does not complete and does not achieve whatever goal it was. And turn detection is just a complicated problem that we're making all sorts of really interesting progress on. But that's sort of kind of the general range of challenges that at least people first encounter when they're building voice agents.
So there is like different levels here. There are some of them that are like research kind of thing. Like, for example, how do we teach a model to know when it needs to interrupt, when it needs to like let the user talk, when it has enough information and can say like, okay, yeah, this is something that humans learn by actually like mimicking conversations. And I guess that's how they are trying to train these models. It's easy to do when it's audio to audio, or it's easier. But when we are doing audio to text, I guess that it's extremely, extremely hard, because how do you know when the person did a pause? Like, this is something that in the audio itself, you can measure. Like, you can say like, well, between this sentence and the other sentence, Jordi like usually makes a pause. So I'm going to go in there. Is this one of the main challenges? Like, it's harder to do in cascade kind of models rather than audio to audio, or it's hard everywhere?
I'm glad you brought that up. So we often, in talking about the voice model pipeline and voice models in general, we talk just about the language model part of it. But actually, in speech to speech models and in the cascade, there's actually this ancillary system that is in the pipeline that is looking at whether or not somebody is speaking, and if they're done and using that information of whether or not they're speaking to determine if they've finished talking and it's now the AI's turn to speak. That's the like simplest version of it. And some of the really interesting stuff that's going on in voice AI right now is expanding upon that idea and figuring out how to make the turn taking more realistic, more human, more effective. And so just to kind of give you a sense of what some of those things are, one of the things that you and I are doing when we're talking in a normal conversation is we're constantly in our heads predicting when the other person is going to finish speaking based on what they are saying. So it's not about the sound, not about the what's called prosody, like the inflection or tone that they're about to finish up. That's only used at the very end of a turn. Prosody is only used at the very end of the turn. Most of the work in predicting turn taking is done based on the semantic content, the ideas that somebody's saying. I'm like, oh, I think they're going to finish up soon, so I need to start generating speech in my head, which is actually kind of a slow process, so that the turn taking isn't super delayed when we're talking to each other. And we're starting to see some of these ideas get integrated into the voice agent pipeline. For example, at LiveKit, we have what we call an end of utterance model, where when the user is speaking, we are looking at just basically two streams of data. One is whether or not they are talking, which is kind of the traditional approach to turn taking with voice agents. And in addition, we are running a language model that is predicting whether or not or I should say, is inferring whether or not they have finished speaking based on the content of what they're saying. So it's basically looking back at everything that's been transcribed so far and saying, okay, given that the person has said this, do I think they're done speaking? And give that a really concrete example, let's say the user is giving a phone number, and they say my phone number is 555-555, and then they pause for a while because they forget the rest of their phone number. Or end of utterance model will look at that and say, you know what, phone numbers typically, at least in the US, they have more digits than just 6. So I'm not going to consider this an end of turn yet. I'm going to wait based on the content of what the person said and wait for them to remember that the rest of their number is 5555. And it's a really interesting area in general of voice agent work, where there's lots of innovation happening. It's really neat.
It is, because you can literally map it to normal interactions. Like, many times, like if they do a long pause in a weird place, I don't start like talking. I just say like, are you there? And then the user
Hmm.
is like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking. So you can see how this happens with humans already. And most of the time, like, we don't think about this. It just, well, we get used to it. And it's nice to see like people now trying to learn from it and say, well, how can we incorporate into machines? And I could assume that in no time we're going to be able to get like really, really good at, like having what you said, it's a human touch on the
Hmm.
machine, like making it sound like more and more human. I guess that's something important, that it's also tones. Like each person has its own tone, not only about the language that they use, but also like how they express themselves and even like the tonality of it. ChatGPT and these kinds of apps, when you install it, it allows you to tell, or in the configuration, what voice do you want? And then you can see that there are different voices, different accents, different tonalities. How does all this play out? Like it's something that goes on top of the model, needs the model to be trained in this direction, or like we will be able to swap different tones and even like change them on the fly, like sound a bit more British. So it's like, oh yeah, no problem, I can do that.
Yeah, so much of my focus is on the B2B voice agent use cases. And part of the reason that people are using the cascade approach in B2B voice agents is because they get more control over the voice output. In other words, it's not just about the cascade is speech to text, then LLM text to speech. It's not just people don't just use the cascade approach for better tool calling and instruction following, but also um, some of the providers out there for text to speech, you can programmatically change how the voice is saying things. So not just programmatically change the pronunciation, but programmatically change things like you were talking about around like the tonality and stuff. So it's really neat to see like you can imagine why that's important, because you might imagine for like a brand to be comfortable with deploying a voice agent for like, I don't know, the initial triage of where the call should go. They would want it to be basically on brand and to sound like what they feel like their company should sound like, and they want more control over how that voice sounds. And so engineers need a way to like programmatically change what the voice sounds like.
Does it affect a lot in the current pipelines things like emotions? Like when someone calls, I can tell, like when my wife calls me, I can tell if she's happy, if she's angry, if I did something wrong. Is this something that these business systems, especially I guess the customer support ones, take into account? Or right now it's like I take text and there is no emotion of the user. It's like yelling at me, it's mad, or it's okay. Like they are just asking like a natural question. Is this already blended in the pipeline, or we're still at early days on this direction?
That's a great question. The downside of the cascade approach is ultimately you're handing the model just text. And so you lose a lot of the information around the person's tone or their mood. And I think the promise of the speech in, speech out models is that they might be able to, those models can ingest not just, what's the right way I'm trying to say this, is that the models can take audio tokens in. And so the dimensionality of the information they're taking in can be more rich. And I think that's why there's a lot of hope and promise around the audio in and audio out models. And even taking that one step further, there's kind of the next horizon beyond that is what's called full duplex models, where they're both listening and reasoning at the same time, or listening and generating speech at the same time. And just to give you a sense of like a more concrete sense of how that works, the Moshi model by Qtai, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but their model, it's always listening to the user. And when it's not its turn to speak, it's just generating silence, but it's still generating something. It's always speaking. And then when it's its turn to speak, when it figures out its turn to speak, it actually emits words. And so that model is taking in and audio out, and it can work with kind of a more rich input data set. I just think that we're going to see more and more of that, but we're not quite there yet with those being in production B2B use cases.
Yeah, like there is like the promise of these kind of ambient devices for quite a lot, from Google Home to Alexa. And I think that the tech evolved a lot. And I don't know if those are products that are a bit abandoned from those brands, so they don't push for them that much. But I think that it's a really good moment for a renaissance of these kind of devices, because literally it's like we can have something there. And then there's these challenges of like when it needs to talk, when it's
Hmm.
invited to the conversation. It could be really
Hmm.
annoying, and I understand what not only the technical challenges, but the social ones. I don't want to be telling something to a friend and then the machine jumping saying like, oh, by the way, do you know that blah blah blah? And you're like, please, not right now. Like I am pretty mad. So it's hard to have these things. So I guess that right now most of the apps literally have the switch of I am talking now. Like I am in a conversation, and there is not this idea of there is an ambient that is just listening to stuff and then magically comes in, right?
That's right. Yeah. So a lot of these like home assistant things like Alexa and Google Home Assistant, whatever. So I'm going to try that again because I probably shouldn't blunder that with Google. So that's exactly right. These systems have what's called a wake word. So, they're not supposedly not, they're running a small model on the device that's just listening for the wake word, and then it only starts streaming the audio back to the servers after that wake word has been recognized and triggers that next action on the device. At least allegedly, that's how they work.
Yeah. Um, how does it work for like people who are building agents today? You talk now about like having like some kind of a small model or an in-device model, like something that runs locally. Are people using these, or still it's like, well, how the models are right now, maybe they are too big. There is some lagging from commercial capabilities to open source to, like being able to run them locally. Are people using like a blend of these systems, or they are mainly saying like, well, yeah, we record the audio here, we stream it there, and then we process it in the cloud, however it's best?
We're not yet seeing business use cases or consumer use cases where the data is being managed completely on the edge, or at least that I know of. There was a little bit of, I think we're seeing some movement in that direction. So, like, we had some false starts with what was it called again? Like, I guess that wasn't necessarily what you're talking about with Humane because that was still
Yeah.
streaming audio to the server. But yeah, I'm not. That's a better. I don't know a lot about like people running the small models on embedded devices yet. I think that's an area where the thing that comes to mind is there's this like system called Espressi, the S3 box, but I'm not sure off the top of my head if that's streaming the data. I think it's streaming data over to the large language models. It's
I
not
think
running
that
them
most
locally.
of them are mainly streaming. Like I talk with a lot of people, and I haven't seen anyone doing this. I was asking because if someone is at the frontier and may see it first, like I think that the sparks are going to be like people from LiveKit saying like, okay, yeah, there are people opening issues in this direction, but I think that
Yeah.
it's extremely early days now with Google Gamma 3 or Gemma
Hmm.
3, I think it's called. Like
Hmm.
there is like some like we may push this. Apple also has showed that they want to have some LLMs on device, but I think that it's extremely like early days, even for text based. So there's going to be from lag to
Hmm.
multimodality. That matches my experience. That was mainly because most of the people listening to the podcast want to learn about what other people are doing. So it's good to have this kind of mental framework of what are
Hmm.
other people doing. For models in the cloud, with open source, there is a lot of fuss every week because there is a new best model every week. Like it doesn't matter how good the last week was, the week keeps improving. Does this also happen with audio? Like every release of a new LLM that it's text improve your stack or your agents? Or there is like more space between like, no, we only work with audio video and they are like more sparse in time for new releases that really like breakthroughs.
The pace in voice AI is also really hard to keep up with. It's not just with LLMs, the speech to text providers and the text to speech providers, as well as people developing these like voice orchestration type models that are looking at the end of utterance. All of this is moving so fast that it's really hard to keep up. And part of my role is to like know what's happening out there and try to bring like the more interesting and exciting and useful products that people are building into the LiveKit ecosystem. And it's definitely something that everyone building in AI struggles with.
Yeah, I mean it's a challenge and it has to be overwhelming because there is so much going on. Like it's like the best place to have your kind of position, like the best time in its history to be there.
Mm.
But also there is so much going, and I guess that it's hard to clean the signal from the noise. There is a lot of things that may look like signal, and they outdate like really really quickly,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
how often like you have previous experiences before LiveKit. How does it compare? Like the piece of being a PM in, like working at the edge of audio, at the edge of LLMs versus, like other kind of more like engineering roles that you worked before or a PM? Is there a big challenge here? Like there's a big difference, or it's like, well, most of the same, maybe a bit quicker?
Yeah, there's kind of two ways I think about that. So my last role before going to voice AI, my last like larger role was that I was the CEO of a 10-person startup in agriculture technology. And that was a YC-backed company. Um, I think about what I did as a CEO, startup CEO in that role, and it's very similar to what I do as a product manager at LiveKit and what I think the role of a product manager is. You're just helping to bring new products to life. And there's a lot of coordination work, a lot of communication work between teams, and then also just trying to like shepherd the process along. I'm in general a fan of trying to not view things in an overly rosy glow and see things for, how most of what people do is approachable. And there's no secret to it. Shouldn't be snobbery around being a PM either. You're just there to help bring new products to the world, to help shepherd that process along. And is very much similar to kind of this my role as a startup CEO, where I was just helping the marketing team and the engineers and everyone kind of make sure that we're all moving together. The thing that's so different about my role now compared to my previous professional life was in agriculture technology. I was always pushing. I was always trying to push the market ahead. You should be trying these new things. Like there's this thing called computer vision now. It's amazing. Look, you can just take a picture of a plant and it'll tell you all this information about them. And the market did not want it. I had to shove them along because it was a matter of like needing to do things differently, and people don't really like to do things differently. Whereas now I feel like I'm being pulled ahead. I'm like it's not push, I'm like being dragged ahead and desperately trying to keep up. And it's I guess it's two different problems. Like I found the push at times frustrating, but also the pull. Sometimes I'm like, can we just slow down for a minute and take a break? Because I'm still trying to learn this thing from like last week, and I still haven't really wrapped my head around it.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to be where I am. It's much better to be in a it's fun to be in a growing, exciting space like voice AI.
It's crazy because you have a product market fit, but you also have industry market fit, which means that that's what you are feeling like, well, it's not only like people are pulling our product and asking for more stuff for the product. It's actually like the industry itself. Usually like people ask when you have product market fit as a founder, they ask your product to do more. And you basically say like, well, I'm the expert in this. Like I am listening to my customers and I know how to integrate this. Now that you have like an industry growing like this, you are feeling like people want your product to do more. But also, like even you being the expert, like the industry is moving so fast that it's like, damn it, I not only have to listen to my customers and have to think how to integrate with my product. It's like, how can I evolve the product with the next technology? So that's something that, as you say, is pretty challenging. I hope that you enjoy it because it's like really demanding,
Hmm.
but it's not something that you can replicate at will. So, like try to enjoy it because it's like some like stars aligned. It's a good position to be in. For people who are PMs and they are not on AI, but they may be thinking about like joining, what do you think that are the main things that they should take into account? The main problems that are horizontal to anything AI audio related. So, for example, should they think about latency? Should they think about privacy? Is there anything that you are like, well, whatever you fall in audio, these are going to be your problems at least for the next year and a half?
I think, well, my first piece of advice is to try it out because it's so much fun. Like, I feel like an artist with this really neat palette that I get to work with. Because every time I like build a little side project or mess around with, LiveKit and what we have, it's like, oh, you can do so many neat things with this. And like, if you're a product manager, you're familiar with your users' problems, you can, I guarantee you're going to like reflect on your users' problems and think like, oh, we could solve so many interesting things with voice AI. So that's my first piece of advice is like go try it. Go to livekit.io and try it because you won't regret it. It's so much fun. And then the problems that you're going to encounter are like which model do I choose? How do I get turn taking right? Uh, I mean, this is still zooming out. I think this is still a problem in AI in general, is that in the media, we talk about these AI models like they're AGI already, but actually the models are here and you have to do a lot of workarounds and massaging to get them to actually produce the output reliably in the way that you want. And you're certainly going to continue to encounter those problems in the voice space as well.
I see. What about latency and cost? So something that has not to do like that much with AI, but systems in general.
I think it's interesting the latency. So when you're building a voice agent, the latency that's standard that you can achieve is just over a second between when the user finishes speaking and the AI starts speaking. And yeah, you can like really refine that and get that a lot faster. And human turn taking is a lot faster. Human turn taking is around a quarter second or a half second. At 1 second or a little over 1 second, you can still, it's not so slow that it's a weird experience and that people can't complete the workflows that they're trying to work through. So I actually think the median latency problem is solved. The problem that we're actually seeing goes back to serving these massive models and how difficult it is to serve these massive models. And so because of the difficulty of inference, we see these like random latency spikes. And if you're working with more than one model in your pipeline, that increases your likelihood of getting a latency spike. Although generally it happens at the LLM level, to be fair. And it's really when you have this latency spike. So let's say you go from like the LLM taking 700 milliseconds to complete its part of the pipeline to 2.5 seconds. That's where conversations start falling apart. The person's like, "Are you still there?" And then the AI finally responds, and then the human's like, "No, I was saying this," and they start interrupting each other, and then the user hangs up. So it's more about the P90 on the latency that's really the issue in voice AI. I hope that wasn't too much detail for the PM
No,
that's
no.
just considering to go into voice AI to build something in voice AI, but that's kind of one of the issues you'll encounter.
It's great. So people know where to look into when they are like joining the audio. I guess that also like we mentioned latency here, but bandwidth may be a problem that is solved. Like in the last years of the internet, we push so much, for example, for streaming video and 5G, and like all over the world, you have like good signal today. So I guess that these models, like these agents, are not affected by bandwidth limitations that much. Like you can build an agent today and it can be used in the US, but also like anywhere in Europe, anywhere in Asia without much travel, or there is still like some locations that it's like, well, you need like literally G, or you are not able to access like this kind of experience.
That's an interesting point. So if you're using the public internet, you still are going to encounter problems, even if you're using you have a fast Wi-Fi connection on the first hop. And that's because you can have all sorts of issues on the public internet that lead to increases in latency. And part of the reason we built the first version of LiveKit, which was this open source web RTC based infrastructure system. Well, the second version, I guess I should say, was our hosted version of that, where we took our open source web RTC infrastructure and we hosted it ourselves on our own private backbone. And that will resolve your issues around like the public internet being spotty. And then about that first, like their point about like the client has to actually be able to send data to the internet. Like I still encounter that problem in here in the East Bay where I live, where I'll go into some zones. I especially encounter it actually when I go into Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley has the worst cell service when I'm down like in the San Jose or Peninsula area, and you still will encounter that issue where like you ultimately have to send that audio up to the internet, and that's gonna make these experiences not work if you're in Woodside and you have 0 bars.
I used to live in South San Jose, and I can confirm how bad signal is there, and it makes no sense. Like you move from the other part of the world to like the mecca of technology, and you imagine like, wow, they are going to be living in the future. And actually internet, like in Europe many times, I don't know if it's about density or what it is, but it's like cheaper and faster. And I was really surprised by that. Okay, so most of the people now that they are using LiveKit, like they can get most of the challenges out, like leveraging your infrastructure. You already work with like really big companies like OpenAI. Like that's a nice like chip on the shoulder about saying like, wow, like we did this, and it's incredible that you did like one of the first projects for the company. So it only got better after that. I also know that LiveKit like raised around not long ago. What are the goals for spending that money? Like, what are you trying to build?
Voice AI right now is growing so fast, and we want to make sure that we're riding the wave. And because there's our other founder, I mentioned our CEO Russ earlier, but David, our CTO, talks about how there is unlimited demand for voice experiences, for human computer voice experiences. And it tracks back to the fact that humans have unlimited wants, and voice is the native way that we express our wants. And so we just want to make sure that we're building the best platform, that we are integrating with the models, the cutting edge models that people are um, that are being released by the AI labs, and continue to be. I think what sets us apart is like the best runtime infrastructure. So we have the best infrastructure that's the most reliable and fastest for moving the audio and video around the internet, as well as building the best framework that's the easiest to wrap your head around and has the nicest abstractions for building voice agents and avatar agents.
It's a good challenge to tackle. Like I can wait to see what comes out of LiveKit and like how it improves my life. It's just like I want to talk to everything. When my printer says I cannot print out of ink, I can wait to be able to ask it why. Like it's just like black ink that you need. Like why do you need the magenta to be able to print this paper, and see what it replies. Like that would be
Yeah.
AGI for me. That's all I am asking for. We have been
Funny.
talking about AI agents for a while. How would you define an AI agent?
Well, I think back on the root of the word agent. So the word agent comes from the Latin word agere, which means to do. So agent fundamentally is something that does something. So that's in contrast to a chatbot where it just responds to you. An agent has to go out and do something in the world. It has to not just generate this snippet of code, but it has to execute that snippet of code. So I think it fundamentally goes down back to this idea that it is a computer software that does something for you. It has to do something, complete an action.
Until now, I never heard someone bringing Latin to the definition, and I think that it actually adds a lot of weight to your to your description here. I usually end the podcast with a couple of questions, one positive and one negative. As a positive, what would you like to see in the next 6 months happen more than it happens today?
What you were just talking about, I'd like to see more ambient computing. That's something that I really want too. Like there's so many times in my daily life where somebody will bring something up and I'm like, I want to learn more about that. And I want to have some like way of bookmarking it in my ambient computing environment, maybe by like blinking my eyes twice, although one might be kind of obvious. Maybe it's a more subtle cue. And then later after that conversation, be able to just ask with my voice, hey, tell me more about the Gemma models that Jordi brought up, because I keep remembering that I need to learn more about them. So I'd love to see us move more in that direction of ambient computing. I think I will be pleasantly surprised with things like the Meta's glasses, and there's an open source glasses platform. Is it called
Yeah, I
Mentra?
think it's the Metra, like the green
Yeah,
logo,
yeah,
YC.
that's right. Um, yeah, so that's my stance on that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really like that. I was thinking about mentioning, like, I think that you are in for a treat because with the glasses are going to be like the ultimate device for having like ambient and sound because they are able to like talk to you directly without other people hearing. It's not like they have a
Hmm.
big speaker. And I think that that's going to open like a new possibility of be able to, like have a relation with AI and be able to ask and get the right information and the right context in the model and outside the model. So that's going to be pretty amazing. And about the negative, what would you like to stop seeing?
There's a lot of directions we could go with that, but I will keep it to tech, being in the tech world in general. I don't know. I'm just kind of over the shameless self-promotion on social platforms, and I feel like I would love for it to be not just about getting the likes and actually wanting to share something with the world. But I feel like that's kind of a cop out because when you were prepping me for these questions, you're like, this is one that somebody said earlier. It just really resonates with me. Like I feel increasingly when I go into social media, I like go in there and like pop in to like post the thing I need to post about like our latest like Agents 1.2 release or whatever, and then I'm like out of there as soon as I can before I see some like thinly veiled self-promotion. So, you know,
Yeah.
the rant
And
over, I guess.
to be fair, the machinery got to the point that there is a lot of people now that they just use social media for pushing messages. They don't read anything because they're like, what the hell? Like I cannot consume this stuff. So there are the people that who are left are the ones that are reacting. And then there's like this extreme loop of, okay, like what works is creating this kind of content. And I have seen this a lot in the last year or so, especially in Silicon Valley. There is a lot of your startup needs to be a media company. Like, don't talk about the product. Okay, I understand not talking about the product. Can we talk about the experience of using the product or the problem that you're solving? And they're like, oh, no, forget about that. Like, we are going to show that we order pizzas and stripper for celebrating Series P. And it's like, what the hell? Like, how can this, like, who cares about this? Like, why are they even promoting this stuff? And I don't know if there is a switch. And, like, I've seen, like, even, like, early stage companies that are pushing, like, really, really hard on this direction. I hope it doesn't work out that much, because if it does, there's going to be, like, a new generation of founders that they copy these tactics, and it's going to get even worse. So between that and the bots, it's becoming, like, extremely hard to stay in social media.
Yeah, I wonder if part of the reason that's happening is because email is dying as a channel, and so many channels are dying because of generative AI. It's become so easy to push content on them. So like we are becoming bots. We are also creating slop and sending out slop even manually. I liked your statement about, like, to be a tech startup now, you have to be a media company. It does seem increasingly like we're going that direction. Rather than trying to educate our users or share interesting things, we're just creating human slop.
Yeah, I hope, like, we avoid that. I don't know. Like, I wish your wish happens, and then, like, in 6 months we have less of this. By the reception of this kind of posts and the number of likes, I think that we are going to be stuck on this for a while. I just hope, like, not many founders, like, fall for it and keep creating value beyond becoming influencers. Excellent, Tom. So it was a pleasure to talk with you. If some people need to learn more about LiveKit, where can they find LiveKit? How they can contact you? And if someone wants to work, for example, I think that LiveKit is an amazing company for getting things done that impact the world, and they're actually hiring. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. We're hiring. If you go to livekit.io, you will find a link to our hiring page, and we're always looking for talented people to join our team. It's a great team. I feel very lucky to be here with lots of very skilled and motivated, but also kind and collaborative people that I get to work with here. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Shane on our team does these really interesting multimodal demos on the new models that come out and the new capabilities that come out that are fun to see. Yeah, reach out to me too on Twitter if you ever want to talk about voice AI.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Tom. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.